Hi, Danielle.
Hello, can you see me?
Yes, I'll stop my.
Okay.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you? We're matching today. Look at that.
Oh, denim on denim.
I'm doing it.
How are things in Seattle?
Um, Sunny, which
They
is
are?
not, yeah, it's like not normally like this time of year. And I think it's just like, I don't know, it's a treat. So it's good. It's good. I'm gonna turn my light. No, it's sunny because yeah, we got a ton of rain last week. And I guess this is just our, I don't know. It's weird to talk about the weather when you can't go outside much. So, how are you?
Uh, I mean, a little stir crazy this week, but overall pretty good.
Good. Good.
I like drive places just to drive,
Right.
but are you able to like walk around or anything?
Yeah. So I go out. I make sure that I go out for a walk every day. I haven't done my walk today yet, but I have been able to like go on some pretty socially distanced walks, which is nice. That's been helping with my sanity, and I very much like resonated with Cachet the other day when she was saying that she's doing yoga every day. Because that's something I've been doing too, to just try to stay calm. I was never really a yoga person until the beginning of this like calendar year, and now I'm just really happy that I have been doing those kinds of things to like have a routine
Mm.
in this like routineless world we're living in. Um, but yeah, it's been weird, right? It's been it's been really weird to be living in this new reality. So, but it's
But
okay.
you're also teaching classes online and stuff?
My last one was yesterday, but my big project right now is that I'm producing a 3 week run of one of my plays where
Right.
I have a two-person play called Nexus, and a different quarantine couple is playing those roles every night for 3 weeks, and that starts next week. Um, so that's been really fun to like have a project to like really dig into that, because it just, I mean, from like the producing end, the work never ends. And so it's literally like every day my to-do list gets longer and longer. And it's been so satisfying to like actually have things to cross off after
Hmm.
many weeks of not having anything to cross off.
Um, yeah, we need to promote that for you because one of the weeks is with Keiko and MJ.
Yes. So Keiko was in the Great Leap over at Cygnet. But I know Keiko from when she was living here in Seattle. So it's been really great to be able to say, like, we got some San Diego actors involved in this, but also they're people that I like have known for a while, and also like this is, but we've known each other pretty tangentially, and so this has been a really great experience to like really talk and like really talk about art and really
Mm.
like settle into like what does it mean to be a playwright right now, what does it mean to be like an artist right now. And so that's been really great just to be able to have that conversation with Keiko.
Yeah.
um, so that's good.
Um,
um, Sorry, you're
for those,
asking me questions,
no,
I should not be asking you.
for those people who don't know, Danielle, her relationship with Cygnet is that she was in the Finish Line, Bill and Judy Garrett Finish Line Festival a few years ago with a play called Dust.
Which I
Um,
think there's some Garrett's on here. Yeah, hello.
yeah, I saw them on there. Um, yes, thank you to Bill and Judy. And
And my brother just joined. There's my brother. Hello, brother. Hi,
I
Michael.
want to wave to him. Um, and how Danielle and I met working in Washington D.C. We both worked at the Shakespeare Theater Company, and then we
Yeah.
became friends. And
Well, actually, we met before that. You and
we did.
yeah, we met. I remember meeting you at like a Theater J show. Uh, when I feel like you kind of came to DC around the same time as Gus, right? Initially or no?
Something like
Um,
that. Yeah, he
and you
was a
were
little
doing
bit
some stuff
before.
with Kennedy Center when I met you, I think. I was thinking about this morning. We've known each other for almost 10 years now,
Wow.
which is crazy. Because we met in 2000, I believe, if I'm like the historian of our friendship correct, we met in 2011, you
Wow.
and I, which is just like wild.
Yeah. But Danielle's, you've always been a very prolific playwright and then a dear friend, and so I'm glad you're still in my life.
Yeah, me too. Like we're coming up together, which is really so wonderful because you hear about all these like, directors and playwrights that are, at the top of their game right now and they're like, "Oh yeah, we've known each other for like 10 years, 15 years." And I'm like, "That's me and Robbie. We've known each other for 10 years. Like we're going to keep knowing each other," which is really great. So,
Yeah, and I was speaking to a friend of mine who is stranded in Ashland, Wiley Gorn, who
oh,
is
Wiley is great.
was working for OSF as a voice and speech teacher, and we were speaking of you the other day on FaceTime.
Someone just exclaimed dust, and that's how I feel about the play too. So hello.
Well, let me start by asking you a few questions about, tell us about your creative journey, from when did you start being interested in the arts and how has that led you to where you are now?
Yeah, sure. I feel like I've always been interested in the arts because like when I was 5 or 6, my mom put me in dance classes. And so I've been in the performing arts that whole time, like off and on, obviously. But for the longest time, it was just, I was a performer for fun. I never thought that there was a possibility of making that a career. Um, Even when I was like deciding what to major in college, my undergrad degree is in journalism, so I wasn't even thinking like towards the arts at that time. And then I took up a minor in theater, and as my senior project, I decided that I was going to basically create like a mini theater company within my like theater department, and we were going to be a new works theater company. And I was like, great, I have this playwright I want to work with, so I like commissioned this playwright. I was going to be the artistic director and the director, and I was like, this is solid. We've got a team. And then the playwright stopped contacting me for
Mm.
just like out of the blue. I never got a draft, and I turned to my lighting designer and I was like, "We have a project due, but we don't have a play." And he was like, "Well, we could write the play. Just the two of us will write it together." And I was like, "That's a crazy idea, but let's do it." And we had like this major brainstorming session. I remember it very vividly. We like sat in my friend's apartment and ate Oreos and just talked about like what we would want our play to look like. And then we wrote this play together called Jim and Paul Meet in Dreams, which was about it was a 3-person play, back when I was doing small theater, small cast shows. It was a 3-person play, and it was about these two men that kept having simultaneous dreams, and they would appear in each other's like dream worlds, and they didn't know each other in real life. And it was kind of about, what happens in your subconscious, and like double stuff Oreos are regular, double stuff all the way. Um, and that was our play. And looking back on it now, it's like, absolutely not what I would tackle now. And it's like I've grown so much as a writer, but without that experience, I probably would not have become a playwright because I didn't know that like that was the thing I could do. And then I ended up getting my grad degree in theater education, but kind of changed my track like a semester in because I thought I was going to get a PhD, and I was on this like PhD track, like taking all these like theater history and dramaturgy classes. And I sat down with my advisor and I was like, this is not for me. I moved across the country to Boston to like take up this degree, and I don't know what to do. And he was like, well, too bad you're not a playwright, because we're trying to like get our theater ed students to be more involved in playwriting. And I was like, what do you mean too bad? Because I am. And I kind of like had to say, like, I have this one play, I'm interested in doing more. Can you allow me to stay in this program and kind of do this like makeshift like directing and playwriting degree through the
Mm.
education department? And he was like, yeah.
And this is this at Emerson?
This was at Emerson. Mm-hmm. And we ended up creating this degree track where I was taking a bunch of like undergrad and graduate directing classes, and graduate playwriting classes in both the like theater department and the like English department. And we've cobbled together a degree for me, and I've been writing plays ever since. But if not for the fact that like I was in hot water basically twice in an education program where I was like, oh my God, something is happening and I either have to leave or push forward, and choosing to push forward, I would not have become a playwright. And now it's like I can't imagine myself as not a playwright, but
Mm.
you know, so many circumstances in my life could have like pushed me in a different direction.
Wow. I didn't know that story. That's fascinating.
Oh, I'm glad it's new for you.
um, what? Tell us about what you're doing now. You've said a little bit like you play Nexus. Is there anything else you're doing? Maybe outside of theater that you're doing to stay creative?
To stay creative, yeah, that's a good question because I've been trying to like sit down and write. I have, you know, theoretically a few deadlines that are in place from different theater companies that are like, we have no idea when this is going to come to pass. And so
Is one of them Dust?
no. So
Oh.
Dust, I was supposed to go into rehearsal for Dust. And so I had a rehearsal ready draft for that at Dasha Theater. And then 2 days or three, like less than a week before we were supposed to start rehearsals, we had to push the show. And so I have the draft that we're going to go into rehearsals with, but it's on hold until at least the fall. And so we will see. But I have a development opportunity coming up at Seattle Public Theater where they are taking my play Halcyon, and I'm in a major rewrite for that right now, but have not been able to sit down and like actually work on it because of all this. And then I have a commission from a high school in Virginia that I really want to get started on, and
Wow.
And I just can't.
How did that come about?
Okay, so this kind of goes back to like our DC days. So when I was in the Arena Stage playwriting group, I met this playwright, Sean Northrup, and he, at the time, I believe, was just starting out his career as like the head of the theater department at George Mason High School in Northern Virginia. And this was like 2013 that he was starting to talk to me. He's like, I really want to commission playwrights. I want to have some sort of a new playwrights group. Like, I want my students to be working on work that's written for them, for their age. Like, they're playing teenagers and not like dressing like old men. And I want large cast plays that prominently feature women. And I can't find that. And I said, that sounds really exciting. Let me know, like, keep me in the loop. And like 2 years ago, he wrote to me and said, I'm finally getting the green light to go ahead and do some original work. And so I adapted Frankenstein for them. They were like, let's start with an adaptation and then we'll go from there. And so I adapted Frankenstein for them, which is supposed to get a first production next spring. And then about 6 months ago, they came to me and said, we want to do a contemporary work too. And so they commissioned 5 playwrights for that program. They're calling it Project 5. And it's going to be a series of plays that are written specifically for high school, predominantly women, with a cast size of 35, which speaks to me in like the most wonderful way. A flexible cast of like 10 to 35, so it's perfect for high school. And then there are some stipulations, like it has to be, you know, high school appropriate language, high school appropriate themes, but basically the green light to like go ahead with whatever I want to do. So I'm writing for them a contemporary play about a bunch of high school teen girls who work in an ice cream shop together. And it's fun, but it's also like navigating like the American class system in a play. And it's going to be a comedy, which is exciting. But also, I'm just like in the brainstorming research phase because I have not been able to sit down and just be like, let's think about ice cream. Let's think about a time when like people could actually be together in an ice cream shop, because I'm just like, I don't know what that looks like right now.
Yeah. You know, Danielle, you're one of the most productive artists I know, playwrights. I mean, you habitually do it so much. So to hear you say you haven't had the time is surprising to me. Means you're very busy, right?
It's not that I haven't had the time. It's just that like I'm trying to be gentle with myself, and I'm trying to like understand that this is not normal. Like this is not a normal set of circumstances that we're in right now. And I think at the beginning I was like, gotta keep going as normal, and that lasted about 4 days, and I was like burnt out from it because I was like, this is not normal.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, I mean, I'm 100% okay with the fact that I'm not being as as productively creative as I normally am, and also knowing that like I do have the bandwidth for like this producing this, you know, run of Nexus, because it's not creating new work. It's about bringing people together. It's about community. It's about creating jobs for actors, and those to me are like more pressing things to be focusing on right now. And I know that the new work, the creative work, the dialogue, and all of that, these characters are going to come to me when they come.
Mm.
And it might be later in the quarantine, you know, and it's fine.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a useful advice for everyone. That's something I've been thinking about too, is like just treating yourself with a lot of kindness and being gentle
Yeah.
with yourself right now. Not pushing or having pressure to stay creative too, because so
Yeah,
often I
because
feel
also like what kind of work is going to come from that? It's going to feel tense. The work that comes out of like pressing yourself to stay creative is going to feel tense and tired, right?
right.
So,
Can you talk to me about, it's something I've never asked you, is I know three of plays off the top of my head that you have written that are about sports. Um, Ice skating, competitive swimming in a high school, and football. And I wonder what is that about? What is your fascination with sports on stage?
oh, before I answer that, my dad is like very adamant that I say that I made face masks for people in my building. I did creatively do that. So that has been a creative outlet, is sewing.
Oh
Um,
wow, that's amazing.
but
Yeah, our costume shop manager made everyone face
that's
masks
so
with
nice.
little signets on them.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
But your question is about like my fascination with sports and
Mm-hmm.
theater. And so it's interesting that you bring up the ice skating, because the ice skating play is no more. Like that was a play that I
Oh, you're done
started.
with it.
I'm just like, it's not happening. But I do have a third in the works. So I do look at this series as like a trilogy of plays about sports and violence. And I'm in the research phase of a play that's inspired by the USA gymnastics abuse scandal and Larry Nasser. So that is definitely something that is in the works in the background, and also something that I have not been able to think about during quarantine, because that's dark.
Yeah.
Um, but I I grew up surrounded by athletics. My dad was a high school water polo player. My mom was a cheerleader. They met in high school. And so that's always been a big part of just like the narrative of my family, is that like sports has been a big part of it. Me and my brothers were all in marching bands. We were around football and basketball all the time in high school, and my brothers did it all the way through college. And it has been like just a big part of my life, and I know that world, even though I don't consider myself necessarily like a sports fan. um and but when I dive into the world of like one of the plays that I'm working on, I like try to learn as much as I can about that. So I wrote Dust, and there's a swim team in it, and so that kind of very clearly linked with like my dad's experience, right? He was in water polo and swim, and we talked a lot, like more than we ever have, about like, you know, what's a good speed, and like what are some good techniques, and like what do I just need to know about like what dryline practice is like, and like what's the vibe of the of like a practice, and how early do you get up, and like what's realistic, right? um and then my parents spent a long time making fun of me as I was diving into working on rushing, because it's about football, and I had never really paid attention to football before. And now I know like so much about football, because I had to write 12, like, no, 11 football players, and I had to make them speak like football players. I had to make it feel like that world, and I have an announcer character in that play, and I had to write calls that feel real. Um, and so that has been, you know, I want to dive into it. I think that sports is super theatrical. I think that that's been like something that I've learned through all of this, is that there is a performance to being in a stadium. There's a performance to like being a fan. There's a performance to defending your team,
Mm-hmm.
as a fan or as a teammate, no matter what they do, And so if they're doing horrible things, like in the case of Rushing, which is about like rape allegations and like how college campuses handle rape when Division One players are involved, like the way fans defend and the way other players hide, that kind of thing, there's a pattern to it. And that's fascinating to me because it's very theatrical. But yeah.
And there's a catharsis.
There's a catharsis. There's so many things that you could just like put it right on top of each other. And it makes me wonder like why more sports people aren't into like live theater, because it's also that once in a lifetime, right? A game only happens once. Like a performance of a play only happens once, and you gather together for it. So there's so many similarities that I think are just fascinating and that I just really love.
Didn't you write an article about this? I feel like I read an article that you did, an American Theater Magazine, or was it somewhere else?
It was for Encore, which is a local Seattle publication that covers the performing arts. And I was writing about, at the time, The Wolves was at Act Theater, and The Great Leap was at Seattle Rep, and Dust was getting a pretty big workshop at a tiny Mercer Island youth program. And so I wrote about like how all those three plays are like in conversation with each other in a way, because they're all written by women too. These plays written by women about like getting dirty and getting messy and bleeding and all this stuff that we don't like really allow ourselves to talk about in society. So
beautiful. Someone said "Go Nats" in the comments.
Oh yeah, that's my dad.
I'm a Nationals fan too.
Me too. Yes. So like I am a baseball fan, I think is what they were trying to nudge me to say. I'm a huge baseball fan. And the baseball play will happen, but it probably won't be about violence. It'll probably lie outside of the like trilogy that I'm thinking of. So
can you think back and reflect on something that you're really proud of as an artist and talk about it?
Can you be a little like I hate to say be a little more specific, but like is there like a specific pride that you're looking to explore?
Just something that like, what I've noticed is in this time is that like it's provided me and other artists I talk to with an opportunity to kind of look back and go, what have we accomplished? Because so often we're looking forward as a theater maker on to the next project. Let's set the bar higher and higher and higher. And very rarely do we get to look back and go, oh, we really accomplished something with that,
Yeah.
Or I learned something from that, or.
I mean, I would love to talk about like what you and I worked on a pretty like rad workshop of Dust, I think. And I'm really proud of that because it's one of the first, it's one of the first times I was able to like work out of town. And so I felt like really proud of that, just that level of like hitting that achievement in my career of just being like, I am now an artist that like can travel somewhere to like develop their work, and that I have like the ability to like go where I was there for like 2 weeks or something like that, and that like we really dove into like what this play is, and we had such incredible time in the room with like that like majority female cast, and we were working on something that was like so prevalent. Like when we were in rehearsal, that was when the oh god, what was the name of it? But that major shooting in Florida happened.
Oh yeah. It's sad that we can't remember all the names. Yep. Well, there's just so much. There's so many. Parkland happened while we were rehearsing it. Yeah,
while
that's
we
right.
were rehearsing. And like the play that you and I put up is like weirder than anything Cygnet usually does, and is like it's just so and the audience was on board. Like that's what I'm proud of, is that we were able to create something that was like so timely, but also it wasn't like I was reflecting on the moment because I had already been writing it, and like so like high stakes, energized, funny, violent, all of these things. And then like the audience went on that ride with us. So I'm proud of that. I hope you're proud of that.
Oh yeah, I loved working on that play. I loved, Michael Mizrarini helping us with did all the choreography and those moments you were trying to figure out, and then Melanie Chin Cole doing the sound. I mean, thought it was a beautiful collaboration, and all of those performers, many of which, you know, there was a few in that cast who were primarily dancers, um, and working in such a beautiful way, a very vulnerable, open way. Um, and then for the performance, we had the audience write letters to congressmen asking them,
Oh, that's
congresspeople,
right.
which I thought was like such a
I forgot
beautiful,
about that.
yeah. Yeah, I was very proud of that.
I was
So,
really proud of that. And I'm proud of it because it was a springboard for what will now be the world premiere out here in Seattle. You know what I mean? Like, I would not be as prepared for that if not for spending time in San Diego with you on it.
yeah.
And we often like forget like how many fingerprints go on a play before it actually gets to be like produced. And so I'm proud of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I learned a lot in that process too, from you, working with you.
I'm glad.
A play
I
doesn't
love
need
it
one
too.
climax. There can be multiple climaxes.
Oh
I will
my
always
God.
for that. That was a great moment. Um, uh, this is a big question. Um, why do you think theater matters in times like this when you can't do it?
I think that like I don't know if this is why it matters, but this is like what I'm going to be looking forward to. I feel like I had gotten a little jaded before this time because I in 2019 I saw 63 plays. Um and I said that's way too many plays. Like I should not be seeing that much theater. I'm just so tired. Like I am, I'm working all the time plus I'm spending my nights in a dark room. Like what am I doing? And at the beginning of 2020, I said to myself, I'm going to see fewer plays. I'm going to be really intentional about the work that I see. I'm going to want to really want to be there, right? I really want to be there. And I'm choosing to see this play not out of obligation because a friend's in it or anything like that, but because it really speaks to me. And I was having a fantastic time going about that for like the first 3 months of 2020. And then this happened and I was like, now I can't see a single thing. Um, and I think that we're going to be hungry to gather again when it's safe to do so. I think we're going to be hungry for that live element of like being in front of people. I think we're also going to reflect back on this time and say, okay, so what makes a play when you come back out of this? What is urgently needing to be told on stage versus would be better served in another medium like a movie or a podcast or a novel or whatever. I think that that's something that we need to really work on in general is like what makes the work theatrical, like what makes it specifically need to be on stage in front of a live audience in this like gathering space versus do we need to really see another version of Long Day's Journey into Night again? Probably not. I also think we're going to be hungry for new voices and new work more than we had been before. Because I think right now in this time of like social isolation, we're finding out like really what is available to us, what has been pre-recorded already, what has been done a bunch of times, what has a great movie adaptation already, like what can we see in our own homes versus like why do we want to come to the theater? And so for me, like when I come back, I'm going to be really like using that like urgency of do I want to see this play or this production, this performance because I really want to see it or because I feel like I have to? And I think I'm going to be in that space of I really want to see it more than I was before. That didn't really answer your question, but I don't know what makes
Yes, it
theater
is.
important.
Right, but I mean, that's I hope that that's true. I mean, I hope that when we can reopen the doors, which probably will be the last thing to reopen,
Yeah.
that we can, that the audiences will be hungry for theater and for theatrical, something that like is innately theater, something that maybe is participatory, something that inspires great dialogue. I think I would hope so, because
I mean, it's a thing that I ask myself when I sit down to write too, is like, what makes this a play?
yeah.
And if I can't answer that, then I scrap it, which is like what happened to that ice skating play you alluded to. I couldn't figure out why it was a play and not a movie.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
and so when I sit down to write, I'm like, what about this is juicy for theater, right? Like, what makes it a play? You could only do dust in a theater. Like,
Yeah.
there's no other space for that. And I want to hold myself to that same level of like theatrical interrogation every time I sit down to work on a new project.
Yeah. There's a question that was sent in before this interview that kind of is what you're talking about. As a writer, why do you choose playwriting over other mediums?
That's a really good question because it's not for the money. I think that the answer is I really love rehearsal. I really love being in the room with actors. I love working with actors. I really love the fact that it's literally going to be a different experience every night, even if it's the same play and the same cast. Um, I love that vulnerability, like of, you don't get 5 takes to get it right. Um, I love, I don't know. I also love to do really great, like crazy stuff that you can't do. Like my football play has a marching band in it. Like you can't get that same sound in a movie. You can't get that same feeling if I wrote that as a book. Um, and so for me, it's about like, I love the things you can do in theater. I love the things that you can experiment with. I love trying to take something that like looks impossible on the page and creating the world on the stage. And it doesn't have to be literal. And you have like the audience buys into that suspension of disbelief and like you are just in it. But yeah, I think the main thing is that I just love being around people. Um, I I got my writing start like writing short stories, and I have a bunch of half finished novels that like every time I go home to visit my parents, my mom's like, "Here's this box of papers. Like, will you please go through this?" And I'm like, "Eventually." Sorry, mom. But like I have all of this like detritus, right, that never got finished, and I think that like for me, I love the transition from that solitary writing process to the collaborative. And that for me, the answer was theater, because I can't do it all by myself. Like I think about actors all the time when I'm writing. I think about like, how do sound designers work into this? I think about like, what is the lighting going to look like? I think about like directors that I love and how they might interpret it. And so that I think is why I write for theater.
Something you said really resonated with me. It's that I always love reading a play that has impossible stage directions or impossible moments, and you go, I don't know how to stage that, and I'm leaning. It makes, as a director, I lean into it and I go, I want to figure this out. I want to
Yeah.
work on this, because I love that sort of like big metaphor.
Yeah, for sure.
Impossible.
I put a lot of impossible things in my plays too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Um, uh, how do you think, you've talked a little bit about it, but do you want to talk anything? Do you have any other ideas of how things will shift after this? Could you
I don't
predict
know.
anything?
I don't have any predictions because I think that we're still early on figuring out how do we cope, right? And so I don't know. My hope is that we won't come out of this with a bunch of plays about people who are socially isolated. Um,
Right.
I have a lot of hopes about how we'll come out of it. I have a lot of like wants that are not going to happen, which are that like I'm seeing a ton of my friends that are playwrights get their first productions and world premieres canceled instead of rescheduled.
Yep.
And like
Yep.
in an ideal world, we would come back from this and actually say, oh, all the world premieres are going to be our first priority. And all of the
Yep.
like plays that should have been seen are going to be seen. And we're not going to do, I don't know, we're not going to do Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, or like, we're not going to do, Into the Woods Again. And we're not going to do all of that. Like, and I love these plays, don't get me wrong. but like there are so many new stories that we need to be telling that are currently being like cut off at the knees. And so I don't know. My hope is that theaters will say, "Oh yeah, we probably should uh, do right by those people and do right by those stories and those voices, and like put them in our season."
Yeah. Yeah, and I hope for audiences, because that's why we do it. But I hope that they're not going to just want to be entertained. I mean, I think that there might be this need to like forget and be entertained, but I don't know. For me as a theater maker, that only can go so far for the fluff of what
I
we do.
think you could be entertained by difficult stories and
Hmm.
complex characters too, though.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I hope that people will buy tickets to see thought-provoking, difficult plays.
They will. They will if you offer it to them.
Yes, from your lips to the audiences.
Well, I mean, like, also what I want to be seeing more of, and this is even before all of this, is I want to be seeing more plays that allow us to have these like intergenerational conversations. At the end of January, was able to see what the Constitution means to me in LA when I went home to visit my family, and I went with my mom and my grandma. And after that production, we had
Mm,
conversations that we've never had before.
mm,
And I want more work where like they're going to spark those drive home conversations and spark those like in the living room after conversations and the next day and the next phone call you have with them, and that you're still thinking about the work. Because if you just see like one of these fluff pieces that you're describing, which I'm guessing are all musicals, and nothing against musicals, but I you know some of them just wash right over you and you're like, that was nice, what's for dinner? Like,
right.
and you need to be having a deeper conversation than that, but the art needs to inspire that.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe that's like that question you asked earlier about what makes it theatrical. Maybe part of what makes it something theatrical is that it isn't something you shut your mind off to.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe television and net like our streaming subscriptions do it a little bit better.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know. There is something about a good step ball change that's nice to see,
I
though.
know. I know. Especially when it's a bunch of kids doing it.
Mhm.
I love to see kids dancing.
Yes.
Yeah, and I love musicals, but like I also love musicals that like make me think.
Yes.
And there are a lot of them out there. And there are a
Agree.
lot of them out there that aren't getting produced as much as the ones that are cotton candy, for lack of
Yeah.
a better word.
Right.
I'm not going to name names. What if they're on the call?
um,
What if Bach and Hartnett are on our live, our Cygnet live?
what? I have a few questions from people that wrote in.
Great.
Um, how does your close relationship to visual art, you work in a visual art museum, inform your writing or creative process?
I know that's a great question. I don't work in a museum anymore, but I did
Oh,
for
really?
yeah, I left in August.
Hmm.
But I did work at the Seattle Art Museum for 2 years. But before that, I was a huge museum fan, visual art fan. I I feel like that is the first area of art that I got interested in. I've never been someone that could draw or paint or anything like that. But my sixth grade teacher was really into art history, and we did a lot of like diving into like the work of the Impressionists, and we like went to the well, no, I don't think we went to the Getty. We went to the Huntington Library on a field trip, and like being in front of visual art has been a big part of my life for a long time. And then when I lived in DC, I was able to go to all those museums for free at the Smithsonian. Um, I just, I think I don't think as visually as I would like to, because I think that if I was more visual, I would be probably a really excellent film and TV writer. I write a lot about characters and like introspection, which isn't to say that I don't love a good set, and I don't love a good like stage picture. I don't love a good like graphic design or any of that. But I think that it's more like out of reach for me because I don't know how to do that as well. Um, so the answer is I really love visual art, but I don't know if it like fits neatly into the way I work as a playwright, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Visual art was my entry point to the arts too in high school.
Okay.
Yeah, it still is something. I'm reading a book on Giacometti right now. It's definitely something that informs what I do.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree, I don't really go to the theater for a stage picture. You know, I think stage pictures are what you remember from a play, but it's definitely not. Sometimes I'm jealous of the directors who could just know exactly how to make a beautiful image. I'm always just like,
Yeah.
wow, how do you think like that? How do
Yeah.
you know it with such confidence too? Um, Another question is, do you ever write thinking about producibility?
I already thinking about like how unproducible this is. That's for sure. I think that like when I was first starting to get some professional work, I was thinking, okay, what's producible? And it was kind of that trend where everyone was writing the 2-character play with no set. And I also wrote one, and it's coming back, which is great because I'm able to like do that in a like in this coronavirus like circumstance where the 2 actors can literally live together and we can make it work. Um, but since writing Nexus, I have not written towards producibility. I've written towards like what is the story that's within me that I cannot get out of my head, and I have to get it on paper, even if I don't quite know what that story is. I had a playwriting teacher who once like described his process as the voices in my head getting on paper. And I think a lot of people in my class were like, "You're crazy," and I was like, "That's how it is for me, actually." I feel like I'm in conversation with my characters as I'm writing them, and sometimes that means that they need to have, you know, 16 other people in their world in order to like function and fully like tell the story that we're telling. And sometimes that means it's a story about 2 people or it's a story about 4 people. And I, you know, I don't really think too much about producibility unless I'm like already have someone attached to produce it. And then I'm in conversation about like, hey, I want to do this. Can we?
Yeah.
And sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes the answer is no, and sometimes the answer is let's figure out a theatrical way to interpret that stage direction or that circumstance that you've written. And so I find that like thinking about producibility is really restrictive as a writer. And so I try not to think too much about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That would drive one mad, I imagine. That's all you thought about.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, we have a little question button. Someone
Yeah,
else.
so if you click on that, then they should pop up at the bottom.
Ooh. Someone says, "Will you please bring a full production of Dust to San Diego, please?"
Well, that is up to Robbie.
I wish it was. Um, what what inspired you to write plays? Did you grow up in theater, or did you find theater plays separately?
I did not grow up in theater. I didn't. I had seen a couple of community theater plays. I think growing up, I have a vague memory of seeing Annie with my grandma, but I really don't remember the play. I remember the program having an Annie comic strip in it. Um, I I grew up on like movie musicals. And so I have very vivid memories of like sitting in my grandma's living room and clutching the like VHS box for Wizard of Oz, which has like a booklet on the front of it. And I remember like flipping through that booklet and clutching the VHS box as the movie played. And I remember watching like time and time again Sound of Music, which was a 2 VHS set, and I had to like call a grown up into the room to like switch the tapes out. I remember the Mary Martin Peter Pan. which we watched a ton. And so those are the kinds of like theatrical experiences I grew up on, which is like, so I feel so fortunate to have had access to all of that. And I feel like that is kind of echoing back now in like what is available for streaming that's theatrical that we're all thinking about right now. I did not do a play until I was like a junior in college. And it was through like church theater. I was an actor for like a hot minute, like 2 years maybe, and I was never super serious about it. And then it wasn't until I started writing plays that I really felt like a theater person. And I think like a lot of it is because like I liked hanging out with the theater kids, so I wanted to write stuff that they would like do so that I could hang out with them more. Like those were my friends. Like I wanted to do work with my friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the honest truth. I agree. Yeah. See, but you just redeemed all those people who got pissed off because we were bad-mouthing fluffy musicals. It's
Yeah,
what
because
it was
like
your entry point.
It was my entry point. And I also don't see The Sound of Music as a fluffy musical. It's about Nazis, okay? It really makes you think about who you should be trusting and singing about in a glass veranda.
Yeah, about like making work with your friends. It's something I always like. You know, you watch. You know, as you know, you write grants. When you write a grant, you have to
Yeah.
like, you know, you have to pretend, you have to say the right buzzwords. And so often you watch these videos of theater companies talking about the work, and it is, I wish sometimes we could just be honest. I mean, we can't really, but like, if I'm just going to be honest, it would just be like, I want to make theater because I like the people that I get to hang out with every day, and I like going into work, and I hope other people like it, but really, I just really like doing it.
Yeah. I've
You
gotten
know?
more and more honest on my grant applications because I like went through a long spurt of like applying for grants and not getting any feedback on them, not hearing back, none of that. And I was like, what if I just be honest? And I'm just like, listen, I really want to create work that I'm not seeing on stage, and like here's 5 examples of like what I'm working on. And that's been better. And like I have actually like cussed in a few. Like I remember saying like, I'm seeing all this shit, and I'm like, I got some good feedback from that grant application. I think it's refreshing to be honest.
I'm gonna try that.
Well, maybe not for Cygnet, like maybe on your own behalf.
Yeah. Could you make some we statements about yourself and other artists?
You know, I was dreading this part. I have one.
Mm-hmm.
That I can make, which is we will come out of this, and it sounds really corny, I know, just coming out of my mouth, but also it goes back to like me saying like I'm trying to be gentler with myself. I'm trying not to like push myself to write when I don't want to write. Like I'm trying to like acknowledge that we're in this really scary at times time. A friend of mine said to me the other day that she and her partner are doing mostly good most of the time, and that really resonated with me because I'm fluctuating between like feeling really great and like really fortunate for like the things I do have in my life and the people I have in my life and the people that want to talk to me right now and the relationship that I have with my own partner. And then there are days when I sit down in the living room with Jeremy and I say, okay, what happens if one of us dies? Like, and so it fluctuates between like those 2 points for me, mostly good most of the time. And so I'm trying to say like, we will come through, and I don't know what that's going to look like, but we will come through this, all of us, in some way or another, and we will come back together.
Beautiful. That's a great answer.
Do we have any more questions? If you have a question, leave a question in the question box.
Yeah.
Should be right where I'm pointing. Boop, boop.
Danielle, you do something really fascinating that I think a lot of artists would be interested in hearing is you have a personal board. Will you talk about your personal board of directors?
Yes. any of my board of directors on this call right now? Is Rachel here? So about 2 years ago, I decided that I would really benefit from having people. I mean, I always have had people in my corner, but I decided that I would really benefit from having from solidifying that and basically saying like, hey, here are some people that like I know really support me in my work, and who are there for me, and who care if I make work or not. And so I have a 5-person board of directors. I wanted it to be an odd number because sometimes I issue a vote, like when I was like, should I apply for this grant? Yes or no? Or recently one was, let's vote on my headshots. Which do you like the best? Because I can't make those kinds of decisions. But more often than not, I do a quarterly check-in where I basically list out the wins that I've had, like the accomplishments, and then I really dive into where I need improvement. And that's kind of where I get super vulnerable. And I say, like, I did this thing in rehearsal and I'm not proud of it, and this is how it went. Or this person said this thing to me and I didn't know how to react, and I don't know how to approach this, that, and the other. I will be completely honest, when like after doing Dust at Cygnet, I was like, I don't know how to have the next conversation. Like, does anyone have any advice? And like, I turned to them basically to say like, who has experiences that are related to like what I'm going through right now? Like, how can we band together and like offer each other advice? Because like, I'm really drowning here. And then I spend the rest of that quarterly check-in basically looking towards the next quarter and saying like, here's what I'm looking forward to over the next 3 months. And like what I like, here's the like career joys in my life that I'm like really excited about. And so, yeah. And I was supposed to have a quarterly check-in at the end of March because that would have been the end of Q1. And I sat down to write that email and I said, actually, I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to write to you all and say, how are you doing? What's something that's bringing you joy right now? How can I support you? What is going on with you right now? And one of my board is Duncan McMillan, and he has been doing this like Instagram live of like living room DJ sets. And he's like, this is bringing me a lot of joy because I miss having people over and playing music for them. And for me, like the thing that's bringing me joy right now is like, I have all these house plants that I recently repotted that are like flourishing. And I'm really enjoying like taking care of something when I feel like sometimes it's hard to take care of myself. But yeah, I have a personal board. It's a 5-person board. And it's what works for me. And I fully acknowledge that it's like a type A personality thing to have that. But it has been so helpful over the course of like the last few years of my career to have people that I know that I can turn to when I'm feeling a little lost or when I want to celebrate something.
That's amazing. For this Cygnet audience, Duncan McMillan is the playwright of Every Brilliant Thing that we did a few years ago with Roe.
Yeah, and
I also love his play.
My mentor. I've known him for like 8 or 9 years now, and he's incredible.
Wow.
But I interrupted you. What were you saying?
No, that's it. If you could invite anyone to dinner, who would it be?
Oh, right now, I know everyone's saying this, but right now I think my grandma. I taught her how to FaceTime over the course of this like quarantine, and I have been like putting her on FaceTime while I like prep my dinner and like talk to her about how her day's going. She's bored out of her mind, but she's safe. And I think that it would be really nice to just be in the same room as her. And this is as close as we can get right now, but like we didn't even have that. She was not like willing to try that kind of technology before she couldn't leave her home. And now she's like, I'm so glad I get to see you. And so I think that I would love to take that a little further and to like actually be in the same room as her. And we live far away. She lives in California. And so like saying I want to have dinner with her is also like in normal times not possible either. But yeah, I think I would like that.
Any further questions? Anything you want to say, Danielle?
For me,
Mhm.
uh, I no, just that like if to any artists who are watching right now, just like don't feel like you have to push yourself to create King Lear at this moment. Like that's no, you don't have to. And if you are feeling like that is like you now have the time and the energy to do that, and you're like wanting to do it, don't listen to the people that are like, I can't believe you're like trying to be productive right now. Like do what feels good right now, because like who knows what's gonna happen when we all come through this. Um, but yeah, what's something that's making you happy right now, Robbie?
I'm juicing every day. I'm cooking a lot. I go on. I'm reading. I don't know. I got pulled out my watercolors and gold gilding and all that, and I'm like just
Oh wow.
drawing and stuff. So I guess that's been good.
Yeah, I love that. Send me some pictures of what you're working on, because I'd love to see that.
I will. I will. And always send me your plays.
Oh, I will. Don't worry.
It's always good to talk to you, Danielle.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you. Good to see you. Take care.
You
Have a
too.
good rest of your day.
You too. Go on your
Great.
walk.
I will. I will.
Mwah, mwah, mwah.
Bye.